This is True Buzz, that Mary J. Now we ain't new to this. For my stoners and for my cannabis enthusiasts, never heard a show as good as this. Number one, it's the best. Bringing in many special guests in the industry of cannabis. Business owners to growers, even artists you know of. So sit back and just roll up. Perfect show for my smokers. True Buzz, hey.
Welcome to the True Bud Show podcast. It's your buddy, your friend, your humble host, Jack Woltering here, and we have a fun episode in store today. We're going to do a deep dive into creative thinking and cannabis. Today I have Shawn Gold, CEO and founder of Pilgrim Soul, a mission-driven cannabis brand focused on optimizing the human creative experience to gain a competitive edge in business and life. Until recently, Shawn was CMO of Lowell Herb Co, one of the fastest growing and most talked about brands in the game. I've heard of them for sure. He has been an advisor to other leading cannabis brands, including MedMen and Charlotte's Web. Previous to Lowell in the cannabis space, his work experience is amazing, and I'm going to start there today, and we're going to move forward to where Pilgrim Soul is now, where it's going, and kind of the process behind it, the name, and what products can we expect in the future. So without further ado, come hang out with me and Shawn for a fun podcast today. I really like your quote here, so I was thinking I was just going to start out and read your quote on creativity there that opens the book. And a big thanks for sending the journal out my way. I've been getting into it. It's really cool. So thank you, Shawn. Thanks for coming on today. So creative thinking is a competitive edge in so many aspects of life and work. It's about reinventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun. That's awesome, man. So tell me your story of kind of how you started, and we'll get to the Pilgrim Soul here, which I'm very excited to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in startups and businesses that, my business has been really imagining businesses, early and even before the internet. I had this company where you could listen to music on the telephone and, because I'm old and I was in business before the internet. So you could listen to like hip hop songs and all these songs that just couldn't get on the radio. You like go through a magazine when people bought magazines and kind of like check out all these, tracks on your phone, just to catch the vibe. Because, radio was the main way that people heard stuff. And, there was only so much of that. And a lot of, it was hard to get on the radio. So this was a kind of cool, innovative thing at the time. And, early in my career, kind of like an ADD kind of guy who, just wasn't that great at school, smart, but just not a great student, had trouble paying attention. So, I never really, a lot of the great jobs I was not getting. I couldn't get past human resources at a lot of these companies. They just didn't get me and probably wasn't a right fit. So the only companies that I really could get hired for were new ideas, people who needed people to imagine things, who needed people to think outside the box. And I was an early guy in MySpace, helping figure out social media. I was an early guy in the blog space, figuring out how blogs work, and developed some blogs like Engadget and Autoblog and Joystick and the tech space. Early, building internet sites, and a company called Wattpad helped scale that business in the early days of that. That's like a 60 million users now sharing fan fiction across the world. And then I was at this fashion company called TechStyle, and we had brands like Fabletics with Kate Hudson, and we launched Rihanna's lingerie brand. And this was the first company to do subscription fashion and scale it to about $1 billion. So that was all cool. But once that we figured out the model, it got kind of boring. So cannabis, I've used cannabis for creativity my whole life. One of my secrets to success has been really getting a second opinion from cannabis, using cannabis to like focus on issues. Oddly enough, some people get high and they, just dream and they can't focus on anything. For me, it helps me actually focus on stuff. So using it to focus and using it for empathy and using it to make nonlinear connections, I've been able to come up with a bunch of ideas for some of these big companies. When I pitch my ideas in meetings and stuff, I didn't say, "Hey, I thought of this while I was stoned." Although that would have been the truth. in a lot of cases. Um, but the cannabis space, I have a company based on cannabis and creativity, helping people use cannabis to be more creative, to tap into their innate creativity. And like, I probably came up with this idea when I was 15, and it wasn't legal and there wasn't really an opportunity to do something like this, but everything I've done in my career has kind of led me to this moment. And what's great about the cannabis business is that it's just not figured out. There's so much to figure out. So the opportunity to get bored with it will be quite a long time down the road. There's so much going on.
Yeah, it's a very exciting space to your point. And you have such a cool story. And thank you for sharing that background. It's awesome how it's led to this point now with the Pilgrim Soul and your
Yeah,
whole journey with that. And you would just have kind of when you were doing these like brainstorming sessions, you would kind of just smoke and just let it, or I guess what
yeah,
I should ask, do you have a favorite strain or do you prefer what's your favorite way to
totally.
smoke?
Well, the first I smoked when I was first smoking. We weren't really getting the strain. I was in like New York City and New Jersey where I grew up, and
I'm
we
from
just
Jersey
got.
too.
Oh, you are
Yeah.
Central Jersey. So we just got weed. It was like Mexican weed or Thai weed or Jamaican. There wasn't really a strain attached to it. And then there was this strain G13 that I got. Like, it was the first strain, and it was so strong. I kind of got like a headache when I first smoked it. I was so high. It was like nothing I'd ever smoked before. It put me in a whole nother stratosphere. And I used to get it from the guitar player in John McEnroe's band in New York City. And uh, so that once I sort of hit on that, I started looking for strains and understanding strains. And now, like, my go-to creative strain would be like a Jack Herrera in California, or an XJ13, which is also like a Jack combo. That's I kind of lean into that, and I certainly like sativas. Hot, sativas tend to be the more creative strains. Creativity, focus, energy, euphoria, creativity. I mean, sativas generally lean into that area. So, those are my favorites. Um, as far as like thinking, so I used all these different creative techniques, you know, my whole life. Besides using cannabis, I've read a lot about uh, different ideation, creativity, brainstorming techniques. And in this journal that I created, the Pilgrim Soul Creative Thinking Journal, meant to be used while you're high, um, I employed a lot of these classic thinking techniques. I just dumbed them down. Uh, I put the instructions in a paragraph instead of like 3 pages, because no one wants to read instructions while they're high. No one wants to read instructions while they're not high, for that matter. So I dumbed them down, and I made the exercises really kind of fun and whimsical and nonsensical, because we want to laugh and have a good time and share laughter and experiences with our friends when we're high. So they're really designed to do with other people, to laugh at yourself and look into yourself and challenge your perspective on things. And then I explain why on the page, as you've seen the book, because some of these things are so ridiculous that you're like, how is this helping me with creativity? So I let you know the mechanics behind how the exercise will help you, and then we give an example. So that was kind of how I formulated the journal. It was a grand experiment. The reason I came up with it, I have a cannabis uh, brand, Pilgrim Soul, that is launching this month in California. And there's it's solely focused on creativity. So there's 4 different blends: creative awareness blend, creative reflection blend, creative focus blend, and creative imagination blend. And those are distinctive types of creativity, how we approach creativity. And I've worked with these cannabis scientists, these guys at Abstracts Tech, in Irvine. They're genius. They're really some of the best. They're multiple PhDs in analytical chemistry. They do the oils for Jack Herrera family. They do it for Sherbinsky and for Josh D, who invented the OG strain. They make like 3D models of the cannabinoids and terpenes, and then they extract the oil. model it again, see what's missing, try to put stuff back where they can. Really advanced stuff. So we looked at maybe like 100 different strains. I mean, they've analyzed over 1,200 different strains, but for me, we hyper focused on 100 different strains that index high for creativity based on survey data from Leafly and a bunch of other sites. And then we looked at not only strains that index high for creativity, but also focus and euphoria and relaxation and so on and so forth. So we combine, we pick strains that have different terpene cannabinoid profiles, put them together to be, again, the creative focus or creative awareness or creative imagination or creative reflection blends. Now, with all that science, you can still, smoke my creative awareness blend and think about, your ex-husband or your mortgage or your car repair. Like, there's no guarantee you're going to have a creative experience. So the way you put it together is that it's, the science is about 30% of it. There is a sort of placebo effect in that you need to be in the right headspace and believe that you can be creative. If you think you're not going to be creative and you're going to judge yourself and you're going to, then it's not going to work. So, and cannabis certainly helps with that, of getting past some of those things. And then the last thing is this curriculum. So the reason I created the journals is they're meant to be used while you're high with, it can be a creative strain or one of my products, but they're sort of like guardrails on the experience. So you're more likely to have a focused creative experience if you do these exercises while you're high, and you'll get some unique output. So I kind of make it easy. The journals are meant to kind of make it easy for you to like tap into your innate creativity. The thesis, for the whole brand is that we're all born creative. When you're a child and the world is, everything is creative, everything is magical. Plants, soil, you feel everything, you imagine everything. It's just, a child is just this ball of creativity. There's a famous study. The most popular TED Talk of all time is one. It's called "How Schools Have Killed Creativity and We Desperately Need to Bring It Back." And it's by this guy, Sir Kenneth Robinson, who recently passed away. And he references this study by a guy named George Bland in the 1960s, who was hired by NASA to identify their most creative scientists to put them on innovation projects. And he created this test for divergent thinking, which is kind of no holds barred imagination based thinking. And he gave the same test to 1,600 kindergartners, 5-year-olds. And 95% of these 5-year-olds tested expert level creative. He gave the same test to the same group of kids 5 years later when they were in the 6th grade at 10 years old, and 15% of them tested expert level creative. Like, the school system and the world had breeded creativity out of them. They told them mistakes are bad, creative people don't make any money, whatever we do. We have this school system that's based on like siloed thinking, really built for the industrial age. And we breed creativity out of kids. So this brand, Pilgrim Soul, is not about teaching people to be creative as much as it is about helping you to tap into your innate creativity. And the tool set is expert content on pilgrimsoul.com, the journals, and the cannabis itself.
Yeah, because just over time, that barrier of the imagination or whatever it may be builds up. And to your point of the kids, I say this all the time because I have tons of nieces and nephews and siblings. I just love hanging out with them when they're little, especially, and just trying to fully be in that moment with them, because that's what I'm like, oh, dang, it takes you away. And then when I'm done playing with them, like, oh, I was just in a whole nother world that I wouldn't have been in without the imagination of somebody so young and, innocent at that time. It's really cool. Now with your products there, is it going to be just how is it going to be sold? Is it going to be like eighths? Is it going to be pre-rolls,
Well,
oils?
this is a great question. I'm launching. So my favorite way to consume is flower, no holds barred. It's it's just as nature intended, the entourage effect of cannabis. But what I'm launching is a live resin blend to start, an oil, which is a it's as good an oil as you can possibly get. And working with these guys like Abstracts Tech is a way to kind of get as full spectrum with an oil as possible. So this is, I don't know, just for the people who are there at home, this is an example of some of the packaging. These are my first, this is just 2 of the 4, but my first collection is a collaboration with 4 different female street artists. And then you
It
open
looks
it up.
awesome.
This is sort of the, this is just the creative imagination blend, but the vape matches the outside. And not only is it cool and you can use this as your stash box, later, but it's also a tin. So it's recyclable and upcyclable. And, and then we explain kind of the creative reflection blend, what it's about. And on the back is information about the artist. Big, a lot of respect for artists. The social justice aspect of the business is working with marginalized artists, inner city artists, more undiscovered artists, where like giving them $2,000 or so is meaningful versus working with big artists. So we put them on our packaging, we promote them, we give them cash, and we're just starting out. So ideally, we make that a bigger and bigger thing. What, interesting enough, when I first started this brand, I was at Lowell Herb Company, like one of the great, original cannabis brands, the beautiful pre-rolls. But when I was there, I did this collaboration with a friend of mine, CJ Wallace, who's Notorious B.I.G.'s kid, and then his partner, Willie Mack. And they have a company, an entity called Think Big, promoting creativity and social justice. And we did a creative blend with them. Like, he sent them 7 different strains that index high for creativity, and they chose orange sherbet, banjo, and one other. I can't remember what the other one was, but so we created this bespoke blend, and we gave, I forget what percent, but a portion of the proceeds to the California Prison Arts Project. And we sold out of like 10,000 packs in a week. It was just, consumers were into the creativity blend. They were into the social justice aspect of it. And it was just a hit. So that's when I decided to kind of leave Lowell and just jump into cannabis for creativity full time.
And I'm stoked to try those too, because I love live resin and I love the route you're going with that. Cause like you're saying, I feel like it's the best you can get that's closest that resembles that flower to give you that entourage effect. And that the art on those look cool, man. I'm excited to try them. You
It's a
said this
cool
month?
gift. Yeah, they come out. Yeah, they're going to be in the store called the High Note in LA first, and then probably roll out to a store called Coastal, probably MedMen, some delivery services. I'm trying to. So I just set the blends. So like in Creative Reflection, I think it's Blue Dream, Pineapple Express, and Cherry Pie. So I'm mixing 3 different strains together, which is pretty unique for live resin. Usually you just buy live resin. This is kind of, it's really, I haven't actually seen this happen before, where someone mixes different blends of oil.
I haven't
So,
either, actually, on the live resin.
So, and then we have, I think the creative imagination blend is Wookie Fruit and Jack Herrera and Super Lemon Haze. And then I have Malawi, which is a sativa with XJ13 and also Super Lemon Haze. And then what is the other one? I can't remember the other one.
Mouth's watering over here.
I know.
They all sound tasty too.
I know. And tasting all these was really amazing. Like, just, going through all these strains and mixing them and tasting them. Like, no, a little more of this, a little more of that. I would get
like a
so,
chef finding that secret little spot, huh?
it was, yeah, I would get, so my manufacturer's like 2 hours away from where I live. So after a while, I just had to get my friend to drive me. I couldn't, I was getting way too high and driving back from the plant.
A little tester shuttle, huh?
Yeah, and then it was getting dangerous testing all this cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, man, I'm excited, like I said, to try those and dive deeper into this journal because, awesome. Um, because with the journal, even like I said, I've just been getting started, but even those first couple pages, man, I actually like already learning stuff, like getting into it, and it's really cool. And like, I guess, how long did it take you? I know you said since you were kind of 15, this has kind of been working its way in your head. Like,
Yeah,
how long did it take you to kind of, assemble everything together? What was kind of the process
yeah.
there a little
I
more?
would say, I mean, there's a bunch of answers to that. In that, well, it took me about a year. So I was pitching this idea to investors and stuff, and I knew I was going to create a journal, but I didn't actually know what it was going to be. So it took me about a year for the whole thing to congeal and to figure out the format and come up with all the exercises. Right now, I could probably do it in like 3 months because I have the formula, but it took me about a year to figure it out. Um, and then, but there's a lifetime of experience to even come up with those exercises and understand the mechanisms and stuff like that. So it you know creativity, I read a lot about creativity and research creativity, and something that was really charming to hear was that when you're like, a lot of creative geniuses are really productive when they're older. They do a lot of stuff when they're younger too, but you always worry about sort of petering out when you're older and losing your edge, of creativity. But what made them kind of creative when they were older was their references. They have, my wife's a pretty well-known photographer and designer, and she talks about how she's more creative now than she's ever been because she has all these architectural references, and they just acquire over time, and she doesn't lose them. And when you're a young person kind of dreaming up, like young person, say, doing interior design or something, you don't necessarily have those references. So it's interesting. It made me very comforting as I'm getting a little older that I could, you just worry about, I watched a lot of, like, my dad, become sort of complacent, telling the same jokes over and over again. And I was like, I don't want to be that old guy who tells the same jokes and doesn't come up with new ideas and just like rests on default thinking. That's actually a big part of the book, where you got to challenge default thinking. We all, you may have thought about a topic, you kind of wrapped it up in a little package, you have your opinion formed on that, and when someone asks you a question, you go back to that. You don't even think about it, like, this is my answer to that. And that the book is very much about challenging default thinking and getting out of that headspace and looking at things turning them on their ear and looking at things from a different way. It's about minimizing negative thinking, which is another great killer of creativity. It's about going with your gut, which is going with your gut, which is different from going with default thinking, but using your instincts, taking more risks. We as we get older, we tend to, not even as we go older, people are just often scared of taking risks, and people are super scared of judgment. So that's another one of the big tenets of the book, like, limit judgment. There's one of the mechanisms in the book to help get past. We have an exercise in there called horrible poems, which, if you're trying to make a horrible poem, it's difficult to fail. So we, instead of like write a poem, we say just make a horrible poem, like try to make it bad. And you're in a situation where either it's so bad it's like good, it's like so awful it's like the best awful you've read, or you're actually a pretty good poet and you share that, and that's kind of interesting. So all the exercises are set up to help people succeed and really kind of you know understand themselves, look inside of themselves. So the creative reflection section is about really looking inside of yourself. One of the exercises would be, write a letter to yourself at 80. What advice would you give yourself? What did you do since you were 25? And it allows you to kind of think about your path, think about where you want to be, look inside yourself. The creative focus section, one of my favorite exercises is, so creative focus is like combining logic and creativity to accomplish a goal. And one of the exercises is about you're the coach of your kid's Pee Wee basketball team. You're up 10 points at the half, but you bet heavily against them. Give a halftime speech to help your team, lose with dignity while you trash yours. And it's kind of inane. If you read this exercise, if you read this in one of the classic creativity books, it would tell you to give a motivational speech, which that's not that fun. But it's speech teaching your team how to lose so you can win money. That's fun. So and then I'll tell you why. The why it's about like manipulation through storytelling and empathy with the kids' parents, empathy with the kids, understanding, the cultural aspects of what you're trying to do, and the word choice and the analogies, and like all this subtext that's happening as you're just, trying to be a jerk. So that's an example of like creative focus. Creative awareness is riffing on the world around you. So one of the exercises is write a field guide for a coffee shop. Like go into a coffee shop and look at one of the people like they're basically an animal in the world, and write a field guide for them. What are their habits? What's their diet? What are their mating habits? Like just try to look at these human beings like as, zoo animals, and characterize them. And then another would be creative imagination, which is, just no holds barred divergent thinking. One of the exercises is, the first exercise in the book is the classic, 3 lies and 1 truth. So come up with just 3 lies and 1 truth. And there's an example in there. I don't know if you read it yet. Did you read that exercise yet?
Which one with the 3 lies?
3 lies and 1 truth. Did you see that one?
I think I haven't done it yet. I
can give you the challenge right now, and there's a challenge in the bottom. I'm going to give you 4 things, and you got to tell me which one is the truth. Okay. In 10%, no, hold a second. I got to think of what's in there. 10% of people born in Europe in the last year were conceived in an IKEA bed. 1. In the early 1800s, 99-cent stores were exclusively for the rich. Hold on. I gotta find my book to find what the. Wait, I can't remember the examples here. Hold on a sec.
You go. I'm flipping through mine as well here.
Hold on a second. I'm really blowing this exercise here. So, So 1 out of 10 people were born in Europe. 1 out of 10 people born in Europe this year were conceived in IKEA bed. 1. The average person swallows 6 spiders a year in their sleep. 2. Coconuts are considered mammals because they have hair and produce milk. 3. In the early 1800s, 99-cent stores were exclusively for the rich. Which one do you think is real?
The spiders.
That is a common answer, but it is not the correct one. So, but a lot of people say that because there was this internet meme, like in the 2000s, where that was being propagated as truth, but it's actually kind of like a meme and a false thing. 1 out of every 10 people born in Europe this year were conceived in an IKEA bed. There's so many IKEA beds that. And I read this particular fact in the New Yorker magazine, so they have pretty good fact checkers.
I like that one. I like that.
Right? So coming up with stuff like that, and then there's adult coloring pages in there, and really kind of.
I spent a good amount of time. I've just been coloring away on one of these pages in here. I kind of skipped ahead a little bit because another question with this. I got like the pencils and then those cool like sheets that you sketch on too. Does that come with? Does that sold separately typically?
Those are sold separately, but all the products we create are meant to be used while you're high. They're meant to like enhance creativity while you're high. So, and there's a couple other products we have down the line that are enhance the different types of creativity, and we're working on a bunch more journals too. So this journal was meant to be like a giveaway with the cannabis. We put it out first because COVID kind of rearranged the whole business. So we put that out, and it was shocking. I mean, we have sold in the last 4 months, we've sold like $2 million worth of these journals.
Damn, congrats on that. Awesome.
And it was, it was totally a labor of love. We put it together. It was like, again, we weren't sure we were really gonna give it away. Um, it's kind of expensive to make, so we definitely charge for
It's
it.
quality for sure. You can feel it.
Thank you so much. So yeah, so it's been like this thing unto its own. And what's really cool about that is when we were pitching this idea to some investors and stuff, they're like, I don't know about cannabis and creativity. Like you're probably not. I mean, that just seems innate. It's so obvious to me, but and probably to you. But what's great about this journal is it's, with so many people buying it and using it and sharing it, like product market fit is really undeniable. Like people want to be creative when they're high. um, there's not a lot of products. I mean, you could, if you talk to an informed bud tender and you go in, they may know like great strains to be creative. On pilgrimsoul.com, there's like 4 different articles we have on which strains to buy for creativity. You can check those out, and there's you can Google it. There's a bunch of other articles on that on the web. But you know, it's it's just and to some investors' credit, it was the minute they heard it, it was immediate. They got it. Um, but the lesson for me was finance people should not be in charge of raising, like really investing in for cannabis brands.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it makes sense, huh? It's because that creativity element.
And just the soul of a brand, like brand, one thing I saw at Lowell was kind of a mission-driven company. We were about, heritage and craftsmanship and sustainability. And a lot of these cannabis brands I noticed were really mostly packaging. They didn't really have a strong mission. If they did, it was like an afterthought. Like, oh yeah, we need to be about social. We need a social justice thing because we're a cannabis brand. It wasn't like born into the brand. Um, and they didn't really have a strong belief system. People buy products from companies that believe what they believe. So you got to really know what you believe, and you got to really believe it. And the best way to do that is just to be authentic. If the truth is the best lie. If you if you want to manipulate people, just tell them the truth, as long as the truth is good. So anyway, so that's that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to manipulate people to their best interest with the truth about cannabis.
Sounds like a nice, honest approach to me.
Yeah, that whole like manipulate people to your best interest thing, like when I was 18, stoned, playing frisbee with a friend, I had this thing. It was like the people you love. I was like, I forgot my friend's name. I think it was Chris. It was like, Chris, I just realized something. The people you love manipulate you because they can. Like it's just in their nature. They have this idea of from television and their parents and literature of what love should be. And then they meet you and you're like, okay, this person's kind of close enough. I can get them the last, mile. And they they like how many you since we're both guys, I'm sure you've dated a woman who kind of wanted to change this or that about you, and then
Yep.
probably the only thing you end up changing is women. Um, but my wife, when I met her, she wanted to change me. And I was like, that makes total sense. Like, as long as she wants to manipulate me to my best interest, like, she started changing the way I dress, and she just lifted my game as a human being, and it was a win-win. So, anyway, sorry for that divergent, line of thinking, but it's all about improving people, and sometimes like advertising and persuasion can sometimes it can be bad, but sometimes it can be great and send people in the right direction.
And with that, in your experience, running so deep, I feel like it is such an awesome time for that. Like would you agree that just in the past many years it has become so much more prevalent to be, just be honest instead of kind of like the old like kind of fake it till you make it, or like whatever the other old advertising was? It's kind of a
Yeah.
beautiful time right now, right?
100%. Like you cannot fool the consumer. Like you can't, it used to be, if the copy was good enough and the budget was big enough, you could almost sell anything. But now, if the product's good enough, you don't even need a budget. You know, Elon Musk, spends nothing on marketing the Tesla. Um, there's so many products that just sell themselves because they're that good. So, you know, not a lot, there's not a tremendous amount of products that fit in that category. So the other alternative is really just telling the truth, being authentic, being true to yourself, because the consumer will smell it out in a second. And, and you'll fail or you just won't scale. So I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and thank you, and like thanks again for even like coming on the podcast, the True Bud Show today, and talking about it, because that just shows how awesome you are in many ways. But it's just real talking to you, and you're obviously a very truthful and honest guy. And like with Pilgrim Soul too, I just want to take a second too to dive in, kind of the origination of just the name, and
Oh yeah.
just how that started out.
So yeah, so that's a good thing as far as being authentic. Back to that. So the poem is it comes from a poem, a William Butler Yeats poem. Yeats was a Nobel Prize winning poet who used cannabis. I think he partied with like Monet in Paris, and he ate it for the most part. Um, but so it was hashish pretty much what he ate. And so the poem is a poem that I used to seduce my wife like 20 years ago, and it's about it's maybe about Yeats looking back on his love for his wife and reflecting on the endurance of it. It's 4 lines. It's in the book, but I'll give you a dramatic read right now. It goes, "How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with a love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face." So, he's basically saying, anybody can love a beautiful, graceful thing. It can be sincere or fake, but not many people really get the pilgrim soul in people. And, I've loved you, as your face changed and your beauty faded. And I got the girl. In the end, we're still married. Um, but the Pilgrim Soul, in context of the brand, the Pilgrim Soul is this native, creative explorer that is born inside of all of us, that is there, that we need to open up, and which I'm trying to really just let that flower and help that open up. So that's where that's where the name comes from. And I tried other, I had like names like Originatives and just things that were just non-man, they sounded good, and they weren't soulful. Obviously with the name soulful is soulful. And I tested it with people too, and people liked it. It just resonated. They like that it came from me, but they also like the feel of it. The only people who didn't like it were like some women who were offended for American Indians. As people tend to get over PC and take on other people's fights, and it's on the internet, and I was like, so I put it out there, and someone did mention that when I was advertising Pilgrim Soul during Thanksgiving. I was advertising the journals, and they're like, I can't believe you're advertising Pilgrim Soul during Thanksgiving. That's so insensitive. It's like, and then just people were defending like Pilgrim Soul. A pilgrim is a spiritual traveler, honey. And then this woman's like, I'm American Indian, and I'm totally cool with pilgrims and spirituality and creativity and cannabis. Like there's just string of people. And I shared the poem with her, and she just still couldn't accept it. I was like, you just like it doesn't matter what you do, something is going to trigger people. I was like, what are you? how about free shipping? We have free shipping. There's people who were on ships who weren't free. Are you triggered by that?
Well, and it goes back to kind of what we were mentioning earlier too, of like the set way of thinking, you know, not even taking maybe a couple moments to take a step back, even especially after reading something, like, oh, there's actually, you know, like just that set. I forget exactly the phrase you used, but you know, like that kind of set.
Default thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
man, I love the name. But like when I first heard it, I thought like kind of like you're saying, I took it to mean personally is like originations. Like Pilgrim to me was kind of like the like origination, like the original soul, kind of like you're saying, like finding that
Oh,
my within me. After talking to you deeper, I've kind of formed this now, but
yeah, yeah. So that's
it's
interesting.
yeah, it's an awesome concept, man. Your story is really cool and it resonates with me for sure. The whole brand message.
I appreciate it, Jude. I really like, appreciate you having me on. If we have more time, I'll tell you some other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. The so like what's important about the brand also, and like the the brand is really about this whole creativity movement that, you know, as over the next coming decades, like creativity is really going to be an essential skill when you think about artificial intelligence and outsourcing and sort of this concept of that we live in this world of abundance and so much choice. Like if, you know, there's the definitive skills. I have young kids. If you have like a 10-year-old kid who's going to be 30 in the year 2040, like how do you educate that kid? How do you educate that kid so they're like employable in the year 2040, with AI and all these, everything happening? So I've done a lot of research on that. My kids actually went to this school that Elon Musk started, called Ad Astra, and I work with these guys to kind of like figure out and answer some of these questions. And what was clear was that critical thinking skills are going to be needed, um, collaboration skills, working with other people, communication skills for sure, and creativity was a big part of it. The ability to make, non-linear connections, um, um, to not like to not obsess over specialization, but to kind of be able to take uh, the ideas from different areas and put them together, because that's something that AI is not going to be as great at doing. AI will be able to do very special, AI will probably get pretty smart and we'll all end up working for the computer. And, there's that joke, the factory of the future um, will be run by, we'll basically have two employees, a dog and a man. The the man will be there, basically a dog, a man, and computers. The man will be there to feed the dog, and the dog will be there to make sure the man doesn't touch the machines. so, so thinking about that, and like the ability to make nonlinear connections, and hyperconnect things is going to be an important part of being relevant in the year 2040. So so that's why. So the brand is much bigger than just teaching people to get high and think of silly thoughts. It's about helping them gain really a competitive edge. As you read the quote when we first started, a competitive edge in work and life, being able to tap into that. If no matter what you do, like say you're a lawyer, if you're a lawyer, I've used this example before, but if you're a lawyer in the year 2040 and you're not creative, your job is going to be done in Asia or by a computer, or you're going to just be able to buy it on LegalZoom. So people need to differentiate themselves. And some people listening to this might be like, wow, that's scary. I'm not really creative. But I would disagree with anybody who says that. Someone wrote in and said, I'm using your journal, I'm not creative, I'm not nothing. I'm like, that's impossible. Like, just follow the prompts. Like, you might not be Picasso, but everyone has ideas, and maybe you have writer's block or something like that. But I was reading something yesterday about writer's block, and this famous writer was saying, if you have writer's block, write a letter to your mother telling her that you have writer's block. Tell her how you feel, tell her how awful it is, and just like, it's an interesting technique. I haven't used it. I just read about it.
That is interesting. I like that.
You know your mother, and you can delve into your own emotions, so it helps you kind of just get things going.
What are some other things that you've done throughout, your life when you've kind of maybe hit, gone down on maybe a little creative lull, or has it been pretty even keel for you? Kind of what's your process, bringing those creative juices back? I mean, we have the journal and we've been talking a little bit about it,
Yeah.
but
But I like environment a lot, so I'll put myself. Well, I've certainly used. I use cannabis a lot. It really is like it's a hack, a creative hack for me. You know, almost 100% of the time, it just jogs me out of my mind. Out of my situation. Mushrooms and other things like that are certainly popular, and I've used them throughout my career. But also environment. Putting myself in a beautiful environment, um, going on walks, um, is also really an interesting thing that I do. Like, and a lot of people have done that, from Dickens to Steve Jobs. They go on walks, and the idea of like doing a simple thing and thinking. Sometimes when people have ADD, they can't focus on something, so they need a simple task to do while they're thinking of something else. Like, I would go on the elliptical machine with I take um, these ideas from work, and I get on the elliptical machine at the gym, get high, and it would help me focus, because I can't think of three things at once. Two things I can kind of think of if I have a really simple thing to do. So it would eliminate me from wandering from my task. Like, my kid had trouble focusing, and he's a smart kid, but and he was studying for like a spelling bee in the 5th grade or 4th grade, and he just wouldn't focus. Like, I was just, dude, like, I'm helping you. I only have so much time. And he just was like, just meandering. So I gave him like just a simple game to play on his phone as we ran words for the spelling bee. And it was really interesting example. It was exactly what I do. It helped him. He had just like simple tasks he needed to think about, and it really helped him focus on, in this case, spelling bee words. And I think he got a runner up in the spelling bee. That's good.
Right. Yeah, it's thanks for sharing those. It's all those little things. I love going on walks too. I love just get the sun too. There's something about like just that environment. You're saying getting a little sun on the face can go a long way for me. Freshened up. And also too, even just going outside, or when I'm shooting a video sometimes, or just editing or doing something like that, I'll find myself almost getting a little stale. I'll just go outside, like you're saying, for like a
Yeah.
couple minutes, just get a couple breaths. I'll come back in so rejuvenated. I'm like, sometimes that's all I need is just a little fresh air, a little something like that. Just get the juices flowing.
Or maybe even watching a movie. Like, I was just telling my kid the story of, Forrest Gump was on, and I remember I had this company in, before the internet, you could listen to music on the telephone. I think it was, as I was saying, and I remember I was selling the idea to record labels, and I was just failing. And sometimes you get in that mood where you almost pick up the phone. I don't know if you've ever sold anything, but when you fail out, you almost pick up the phone and you have this vibe like, you don't want to buy anything from me, do you? Like, you don't say that, but it's just implied, and you just continue to fail. So I was like, I'm gonna ruin my whole business if I continue to work today. And I always feel guilty from not working. But I went to see Forrest Gump, and I just I just took the middle of the day. I left, went to a movie, and it just changed my whole outlook on life. And sometimes when I go to see a movie, I become the movie. I become the vibe of the movie. You walk out of a horror movie and you're like, everything is scary. And same thing when you go see like a happy, inspirational movie. So, and I remember coming back that day, and just succeeding and ripping it and closing a bunch of sales at the end of the day. I mean, you worked like an hour and a half that whole day, but it was like more successful than 8 hours of another day, and definitely more successful if I stayed there that whole day. So that was kind of a lesson to me at that moment. I was probably in my young 20s. That sometimes you need to take a break, do something different. It's like it again, if you you have a guilt and you always feel like you need to be working and doing something, you know, for me, the lesson was you need to, like, you are doing something. Like if you might feel like you're screwing off, but you're actually improving your life. And that's actually kind of coming full circle. That's what I meant the journal to be. Like it feels like you're screwing off. Like you doing this journal and getting high, it really feels like you should be doing something, like this is just too fun. You should, this can't be good for you. But it really is kind of a self-help book that's hidden in these sort of inane, funny questions that we ask you to answer.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that too, because I feel that same way. If I'm not doing something, I'll definitely feel guilty. And it's like last week I did the same thing. I went on a walk because I was doing something. I'm like, today I'm just not, feeling. I need to take a step back. I went on a walk. I came back. I felt great, and that's awesome too. That like it came full circle with the journal like that. Now I have another way to do that. Throughout the day. I'll probably
Yeah.
end up using it late night is when I've been looking at it. But I think nighttime. I don't know. I've always said too. I need to. I've always said I've never done it. Is do like a dream journal or get up in the morning and journal right away.
Yeah.
Um, maybe I
Yeah.
could start using this in the morning. Maybe that would help me more get creative too, right off the bat, opening the day up with a little
Oh, that's
exercise. Could be a
interesting.
cool way to do it too.
I mean, the thing is new. There's so many, like, I'm getting a lot of feedback from people about how they're using it. Some people are doing it on Zoom calls with friends. They're doing it with their husbands and wives or boyfriends and girlfriends. There's an exercise in there called word links, and there's two seemingly unrelated words, and you have to make a connection. So an example would be like tambourine and squirrel, like not connected, but and then you have to create 4 or 5 words that create a bridge from one word to the other, or senator and duck, hooker and hot sauce, remote control and divorce,
Sounds
which
perfect for those word matching for my family. We love playing like taboo and stuff. That's kind
yeah.
of what it remind me of is just like fun word games like that. It's awesome.
So what's interesting is when you do that with like a partner, it's remarkable. People are laughing at, like, that's how you got from squirrel to tambourine, like that's the path you took. I never would have, like, so it can be really fun to share these exercises with people just to see how they think, and and just laugh at yourself and laugh at your friends.
Yeah, and it must be cool for you, like you're saying, to hear this different feedback from people, from just different ways they use it to what they've experienced down the line too. So you said it came out what? How long ago? You,
I really started selling it in like October, but I was testing it in June, July. I got like 5,000 units and I put them out there, and they went like really quickly. So then I had to order more, and it took a couple months to get them. And I ordered like the 5,000 units went so fast that I ordered like 70,000 more.
oh damn.
I mean, I never published, that's a big risk. And then I just do it when I was selling those in December. I just ordered another 60,000 of them. I'm out of books. Well, I have a little bit. I've slowed down my marketing because I'll just run out of books. So or journals. So um, it's I mean, we all want to. The ideal, the utopian, job is when you get paid to think about the things you like to think about, and you make money and you make an impact. You make people's lives better. I can't imagine anybody who doesn't think of that as as the ultimate kind of you know job description. The things worth doing without question are the things we do for other people. It's hard to do that, it's hard to find jobs like that. People, coming out of college today, it's more inbred. You know, back I've always been at jobs like 2 years, and then I got to do something new, which was unusual. Like in my generation, people would like work at something for decades and you know get a pension. And I'm actually that's a little bit before my time, the pension part. But now everyone's jumping around, experiencing so many different things, trying to find their groove. And that's definitely the strategy. You gotta, Stella's got to get her groove back.
Yeah, and to your point, yeah, everybody's got different, so many different gigs. You talk to, the average person, you get in an Uber, they're like, oh, I have 3 other jobs, I'm doing this. so on and so forth. But it brings it back to your point too. I really like that you made with the creativity aspect of how, when I opened up the show talking about it, but like it's been hitting me throughout talking to you, especially in the future, how important this is, because it will be the separating factor between somebody who's not creative and somebody that's
Yeah.
creative. The creative person is going to land the opportunity, the gig, whatever it may be, over
Yeah.
somebody who hasn't worked
And
on that muscle.
another thing that I mentioned, but I didn't extrapolate on, was this concept of abundance. That we live in this world, we have so much choice. Obviously, this is not relevant for Africa, or or some third world countries in the world. But when you live in a developed country like America, Australia, UK, Europe, um, you have so much choice in the things you buy. You go to the store to buy a blender, and it's not enough to just blend. Function is not enough anymore. We need meaning and story and sustainability, and so many different things we look for in design, clearly, because you're going to be blending maybe less than 1% of your life while that thing sits in the kitchen. So there's all these things that we look for in product, and all these things that are put into products that we buy and services that we buy are byproducts of creativity. Storytelling and imagination and design, these are all things that that we look for, and meaning, that are part of a part of of creativity. So that's another reason why creativity is really essential in the 21st century, and becoming more and more essential.
Yeah, and I'm excited to share this with my family and stuff, because we're all pretty. I like think we're all pretty creative people, but this will make an awesome gift too. Come their birthdays. I might just have to. Have 7 brothers and sisters, so I might have to get
Oh,
7 of them.
wow.
Send them out. Once on their birthday.
where
So
where are you in the birth order?
I'm the third one down.
The third, like the middle child. Pretty
Yeah,
easy to be a middle child in your family.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it's a good place. I always had but it's a big gap, young, about 20 some year gap between the oldest and youngest. But it's taught me a lot, man. And like you were saying earlier, I mean, that's what it's all about, is the people, family, friends, and
Totally.
just creating that world around you. Cause that's what I've been wanting. And, like you said, like the dream gig is basically to kind of live on your own terms while doing good, have that freedom and be able to have the freedom to do good in the world is what I've been chasing. It's a process, but you also inspired me earlier when you're saying that creativity tends to grow too as you get older. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. Again, I always worried about that. I remember going to this early on. I was chief marketing officer of MySpace, and I was overseeing MySpace music. And so I used to go to a lot of concerts, and I went to this early Black Eyed Peas show. And I saw this guy. He was like, he must have been like 70, and he was like, looked cool. Like, this guy looks so cool. I was like, I didn't know who he was, but he just radiated like cool. And he was like wearing a 3-piece suit too. He wasn't like dressed, in any groovy way. It was just, I was like, this dude is dialed in. I don't know who he is. Anyway, he ended up being like the drummer for the Rolling Stones. But it was like just inspirational to see, like, wow, man. I like, again, I maybe worry a little too much about losing, not being cool when as I age. But I think to stay, and cool is kind of a silly word, but to stay relevant, it's about idea generation, like to be open to new ideas. And even if you're not able to generate new ideas, to be open to new ideas. One of my favorite, I wrote a couple quote books too. um, I put together a couple quote books. One of my favorite all-time quotes that I live my life by is, where there's an open mind, there's always a frontier. So there's just something to discover. You can't close it. There's perspective is an endless search. Your opinions are based on what you know. Should you gain more information, they should change. And the other quote that I use with that, my second favorite quote, is, only the insane take themselves seriously. Because when you're stoned, or you're out there on the frontier, or you're trying new things, like, you can't take yourself seriously. That's when people get paranoid and have a bad time. You gotta, always be willing to kind of laugh at yourself and be like, oh, this is not me. This is an experiment, or this is not me. I'm just high. Like, you can't, like, I give a lot of advice to people who get high for the first time because it's legal and people are trying, and and they smoke like some really strong sativa or they eat an edible and they're just way too high and they never go back to cannabis. It like doesn't agree with them. So try to hedge that. Tell people to like don't judge yourself for like 20 minutes. Like sometimes there's a gestation period. You need to catch the wave. Even for experienced smokers, like I'll smoke and I'll be much higher than I want to be sometimes, and I just breathe, drink some water, and pretty much 100% of the time I catch that wave and have a really fun creative experience.
And like you said, it can happen to the experienced person. I was talking to my buddy today on his podcast. Mike Mazzalotti is a comedian. He was saying he smokes all the time, and he said there was something, he smoked this joint, and all of a sudden he was having like an anxiety attack, and it just took a little bit to settle out. He went outside, went on a little walk, and just mellowed into it.
Yeah, yeah, it happens, man. I've had yeah, I had a crazy bad experience at this restaurant Koi in LA. I think I just got off a plane, so I think part of it was like being really dehydrated. And sometimes when I get high, my body's like, "You need to drink water." It just tells me what I need. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed at this bar, and and then paralyzed and paranoid, and people, are they looking at me? It took me like 15 minutes just to move like 10 feet outside the door, and I was supposed to meet somebody there. They were like 2 hours late. I've never waited 2 hours to meet someone in my life. I can't even believe they showed up, and I was even more disappointed that I was there. But if they had arrived, I mean, it really took me a long time to get my shit together. And we had our meeting, but I was if they had showed up earlier, it would have been awful. So it all worked out. But that was the one time when I just had like it must have been some kind of anxiety attack. Yeah, it was just awful.
Yeah, and it's cool that you raising awareness for that, especially for the beginner user, because I try to talk about the same thing and say it too. As always, just start slow. Even if people do that though, I on my ex girl, I gave her a little bite of one of these little mints, and it just took her off. Like I could eat 20 of them. So
Yeah,
I just tell everybody, it affects everybody differently. Back to like the strains that you're in these live resin pens, it's going to have different fun effects for everybody. Um, that's cool, man. I'm really excited to try those again. I know I keep talking about. I've been geeking out on live resin for the past couple months. Not smoking not doing as many vapes as usual, but live resin ones are always hitting me right.
but any particular brands that you like?
I had a Absolute Extracts is pretty good. I had what's the one I had more recently? Shoot, I'm spacing out, man.
There's um,
The
Raw Garden. That's a
Yep, Raw Gun. Yep, and I bought their stuff too. I like buying too, like the live resin or other stuff, and loading it in my vape pen with the little attachment, so I can do it on the go. I'm not huge on like taking dabs all the time, but I do
right.
like that fresh concentrate taste. The terpenes, everything going on, like we were saying, the
Yeah,
entourage effect. So,
Lowell has like a little injection gun they sell.
oh really?
I think it's rosin, which is even better. It's a harder process, more laborious process, but rosin is a solventless process, which is again it's in its super full spectrum
Yeah,
full spectrum oil.
the processes of these, and like how you said you have, from narrowing down thousands, or you said you guys were kind of focusing on 100 after all of
Yeah,
those. That whole process to me is really interesting too, of just finding that what puts together, like you said, oh, it needs a little more of this taste in there, a little more of this. That's really exciting
yeah,
to me, man.
totally. So the um I always you ever I don't know you have a podcast, so you have to listen to yourself all the time, but it's it's really hard to listen. Like I've been going off just kind of rambling during this podcast, and thank you for letting me do that and making me feel comfortable in doing that. um but I always like cringe when I listen to myself back on a podcast. It just I just think a lot of people do that,
Oh, I
and
do too.
I'm
I
gonna
don't like editing them.
yeah, I'm gonna cringe a lot for this one.
No, man, that'll be on my end, man. You've been providing with me with some good ideas, man. Great conversation, and just being real. Like,
I'm trying to be real, drop some knowledge, infotainment.
I like that.
Um, I've been around for and experiencing a lot of stuff, and and had a lot of successes and a lot of failures, which I learned probably a lot more from the failures as we do. Um, but the it's all about sharing. Like again, that's what Pilgrim Soul is about, and that's what um, that's what life is about, really. Again, so kind of one last thing. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, and he asked me like this, my best thought while high, and I gave this stupid answer. I wish I just couldn't think of anything. But the probably the best, and this is like sort of like imparting life advice, going back to that. Um, I was on my 30th birthday party. I took mushrooms, and someone asked me if I was happy, and this was all before like all the happiness research came out from Yale and Harvard and everybody. And I was like, whoa, that was like, obviously I was tripping, but it was the most profound question. I was like, I don't know. Like, how do you know if you're happy? And then once you're happy and you realize it, it's like you almost have to start all over again. Like, you reset the bar again. You have to work towards something else. So I developed this barometer for happiness that evening at 30 years old, which I still use today. And I'm going to share it with you. And it is based on 5 things, which are health, love, family, friendship, and work. So, health is always number one. Unless you have it, then you take it for granted. Work is kind of interesting. A lot of people put that number one, and certainly there's a time in your life when it's really important. But when you're on your deathbed, and kind of a morbid thought, but what you're going to be thinking about is love, family, and friendship. The stuff that really makes us happy are relationships. When people ask us, hey, how you doing? We tend to go to work first, because I think it's probably the most measurable, the less invasive thing to talk about, maybe. But it's definitely like, it's weird because I think about this a lot, but it's not the most important thing. I've always put love first, hence Pilgrim Soul poem. And I find that's made me pretty happy over time. Really focusing on love and love relationships and family um, has made me pretty happy. I have a lot of really successful friends, like, you know, some of the most successful people on the planet. And not a lot of them experience a lot of happiness. They've given up, um, they've given up love and family in a lot of cases to change the world. And they're important people, and they've made a big impact on a lot of people. But and some of them have well balanced lives, but it's difficult. It's really difficult. So my parting advice is, the barometer for happiness is just, when someone asks you if you're happy, think about love, think about family, work, friendships, health. They don't have to be, you don't have to be at your end game. It's a way of, happiness is a way of traveling. You just need to be making forward progress in some and not all, and be aware of where you're going in each of them. And that's all I got to say.
Well, thank you for those beautiful words of parting advice right there, man, because I kind of try to live by that, but I have never thought about it or broken it into something that can be said that eloquently and just nice. Man, I'm a strive for that, man. Thank you. Thanks again for coming on today.
Man, I really appreciate it. See you soon. I'll get your info and send you some samples of the product.
Oh, I'm gonna be looking forward to it.
All right, peace.
All right. Thanks, Shawn. Peace, man.
Bye.